My name is Markus Böckle. I'm today presenting our next SEPI's featured member, Steve Dix, and I'm very happy to welcome here a very positive and great psychotherapist. And I'm very looking forward to what he can tell us about his practice and his research and what he does in his life. Steve, do you want to give us a very short introduction about yourself, who you are, where you work, and what you're doing?
Yes, I'm a clinical psychologist and I work at our organization called Nysa Therapy. It is a social business in the sense that rather than associating with academia or nonprofit kind of organizations, we operate as a business, but under a social business model in which the business is designed to solve a social problem, not to make money for stockholders and shareholders. So it is a social business, and we have a staff of 7 therapists and Mary, our education director, and support staff for billing, etc. And primarily, we are an education facility. We teach a model of integrative psychotherapy designed to treat and heal personality disorder.
Very interesting. So, are you specialized on specific personality disorders, or is that the spectrum personality disorders? And what kind of treatment perspective do you have for personality disorders?
Well, we have in our taxonomy, we have 12 personality disorders, and we treat all of them, most of them successfully. There's a couple, paranoid and schizotypal are still causing us a lot of trouble, but we're also a research and development organization where we're constantly trying on new approaches. But we have these 12 personality disorders we treat, and we find that our model says that rather than a personality disorder being a core identity with attached features, you know, borderline personality with narcissistic and histrionic features, for example, we take a much more dynamic view, and we say that every time we get more dynamic, we get more successful. So the dynamic view is that a patient enters primarily identified with the borderline position, for example, but under certain stressful conditions, they will shift to histrionics or they will shift to avoidant positions. They will move. And so it's very important that we include all 12 of these basic personality disorders. And there may be more, there may be less, depending on your taxonomy. We use these 12. But because we want you to know that if there is a shift from borderline to histrionic to avoidant, you've got to follow the patient as they shift and adjust your treatment posture according to those shifts.
Very interesting. And what would you say are the most important shifts that you have to do as a therapist in order to be able to treat those shifts in the patients as well?
Well, again, our taxonomy is split into 2 levels: an attachment level, which we believe is a developmental arrest during the first 18 months of life. In Erickson's system, Erik Erikson's system, it would be trust versus mistrust. And then there are people who are primarily developmentally arrested in that second phase, autonomy versus shame and doubt. The first group, in the attachment group, are primarily insecure, and their insecurity is about the need to try and develop maladaptive patterns or defensive patterns to stay attached to a caregiving other, a primary attachment figure. The second group are separation defended. They're in the separation process, according to Margaret Mahler, for example. They'd be pulling apart. And their job is to remain separate and autonomous in the face of a caregiving other. So if you're in the first group, you're primarily insecure, more borderline. If you're in the second group, you're primarily defensively inflated, more narcissistic. So if someone moves from being insecure to inflated, you have to adjust your treatment posture, because in the insecure position, you're going to be primarily very empathetic and leaning in and being connected. And then in the separation defended presentation, you have to be what Peter Fonagy describes as marked. You have to hold a certain distinct difference. And Mary, our education director, says it's the difference between looking that little baby in the face and holding that toddler's hand as you cross the street with her. You know, you've got to have very different countertransferential postures depending on those two presentations. And you have to move fluidly between those.
That's a very beautiful approach. And I think especially in personality disorders, it is about the relationship, and depending on what kind of personality trait is at the top at the moment, which is presented by the patient, that's where you have to exactly start treating and respond in a very integrative or very positive perspective. And I really like this shift between different phases or states of the therapist has to take in order to be able to help and support the patient. That's very beautiful.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
And so at your, how would you say, is it a clinic or?
It's a clinic / training institute, I guess is the name I'd give it to it. I've never thought of that before, so thanks for the question. What is it, this place?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you the question. It was like, how can I name it at the moment? But let's say it's a clinic, if that's okay.
Yes, let's call it clinic.
And how would you say that you're implementing that with your team? I think you have a very special and very beautiful way of treating personality disorders. And how do you train your psychotherapists, your psychologists, and who are the persons working at your clinic?
Right. So part of our position is that people like me do not make the best therapists. I am primarily a thinking type. I'm a head type. I'm a theorist. You know, I'm a thinker guy. And most personality disorder people need someone who is more relational, who is more engaging, who is more a feeling type, according to Jung's typology, more a feeling type person. And so what we are doing is we're hiring people who are more feeling type people. And they tend to be master's level, because if you're a feeling type people, a PhD looks like, are you kidding me? I just got through 2 years of college and now you're going to make me go more. Whereas I'm going, a PhD, oh boy, maybe I'll get a second one in anthropology, you know? And so we take them because they're very relational, but we want to translate. I say, if I can take what's in my head and put it in your heart, we're going to make great therapists. And that's what we try and do. We try and really translate very complicated psychotherapeutic ideas and techniques into forms that are very accessible to that master's level person. Because not only are they the most qualified to do therapy, they are the people who do the most therapy. Most therapy is done by master's level, and yet most books on psychotherapy are written by PhDs, I would say, for other PhDs. And so our job is to reduce those ideas to their basics. As Kate, one of our therapists, says, she'll look at me and she'll go, Steve, just say it. You know, because I'll start weaving all these theoretical ideas. Just say it. I'll go, oh, it's this. She'll go, okay, thanks. And then she'll go use it, right? And so our people are feeling type, highly relational people who don't, they're very intelligent, don't get me wrong, but their intelligence moves in a more relational, emotional vein. And so we reduce those ideas, we present them to them, and then we send them into the room to start doing therapy. And that's the model. And then Mary and I are working right now on an online course that goes through how to treat all 12 of the personality disorders. And we're hacking through that, and we're getting someplace with that. So.
That's a very beautiful way of teaching and seeing that there's two different ways of approaching psychotherapy, more from a rational and then more from a relational perspective. And that probably there might be two different sets of people who are better in the one or in the other, or maybe some people are made for both. But I really like that perspective and the way you're saying that you're training your master students who are doing most of the job of treating the people with personality disorders.
And they're lovely people. I mean, they're just such lovely people. So they always hate it when I say this, but I say, you are a better therapist than me because you have the personality for it. You have the temperament for it. I am more skilled than you because I've been doing this, since dinosaurs roamed the earth. But my skill doesn't mean I'm better because that relational instinct that you have is going to make you connect to these infantile and toddler states in a way that has a lot more sophistication and competence than I have. So I have, if I'm looking at a presentation, Marcus, I've got to go through a lot of theoretical movement to get to a place where I can present my intervention well. And I can do that because I've been studying for a long, long time. But the people who are talented at this don't have to go through all that mental stuff. They sit in their emotional intelligence, in their relational intelligence, and something intelligent responds quickly and immediately in what we call the countertransference report, or their ability to state their feelings out to the patient. So
That's very beautiful as well. And I'm just picking up what you said before is that you're at the moment trying to make a video training program. And my question is also, do you have written a book or something that one is able to read or find the categorization and the treatment models that you're using?
well, here's kind of one of the dirty secrets of psychotherapy that people don't like to talk about. But I've been training people in personality disorder treatment for a long, long time, pushing 25 years now. And I can tell you, master's level people on the whole do not read books on psychotherapy. And people don't like to admit that. And we want to talk about the things that are real. And so they don't read them. The books are too abstract, they're too theoretical, they're not relational enough. And so we have our online course has primarily videos, and then it has bullet points or short paragraphs where the reading is very accessible, where we just say it like Kate would ask us to do, where we just say it. And in that just saying it, we get the written part done on the online course without a book. So no, we're not going to write a book on this.
But I think that's a really great idea because I completely agree that reading books is sometimes very abstract and it's very hard to access the information inside. And when you have videos, and I think especially with younger students, it is that people are watching videos at the moment and learning from a person you see and you hear is much easier than when you have this abstract thing of a book in front of you. Still, I
Yes.
think books are useful, but for training sometimes, I think the practical part is much easier to learn on different ways than reading.
Yes. So I'm a big Kernberg fan. I love Otto Kernberg. I've been faithful to him for a lot of years. But I took my first course in psychology in 1972, The Interpretation of Dreams by Sigmund Freud, 1972. And I've been studying psychoanalysis continuously since then. And I pick up one of Kernberg's books, and I have to read a passage 4 or 5 times before I understand it. Now, are we going to ask that feeling type, master's level, emotional person to read that passage 200 times before they understand it? No. Let's show you how he does it, and then you can run with it.
That's a really, really great idea. And I really love that training is now able to be brought to the students via videos, and that it is something you don't have to come to the clinic all the time and you can do offline. I think that's an additional very positive thing, that the rhythm and the speed of learning is very different in people. And in videos where everybody can take the time and they need for learning, I think that's just a really, really beautiful way of teaching.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're happy with what we're doing with this now.
We were talking about an additional very interesting feature of the way you're working, and you told me about the Wittenberg model, and that being the core of your therapeutic approach. And do you want to tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, so again, we integrate, and we also are looking for things to be more dynamic. When things move, something happens, right? When things are static, not much happens. So we have two basic core integrations that we work from. The first is our object relations model, which is based on the Wittenberg principle. And then the second is our touchstone, which is based on ideas from humanistic psychology and strategic therapy. So the object relations theory is that there is a pain or disordered side and an authentic or functional side. So the child goes through a set of experiences early on, and there will be authentic relationship with the mother, there will be attachment, there will be separation. This will be carried out with care and security on the part of the mother, and there will be this authentic experience the child has. And so the bulk of their identity, the bulk of their intrapsychic libido will move towards that authentic side. On the other side is the disordered side. And the disordered side is where the pain happens. And in these painful situations, there is pain without secure response, without attunement on the part of the primary attachment figure, also archetypally known as mother. And so the child over time develops a state of despair and defensiveness because their struggle has not been well attuned to or securely attuned to. Now, this is fairly similar to basic models of object relations, this split. But what Mary Wittenberg, our education director, came up with is the insight that these are not split, as is often thought. They're in fact a continuum. And as a continuum, a continuous state of self that you can move back and forth upon as a continuous state, anytime you do something to correct a painful or disordered experience, it has an effect on the authentic side of the self, the eccentric side of the continuum. Anytime you affirm something that is authentic on the authentic side of the self, it has an effect on the disordered side. So anytime you're working in either of these positions, you're having an effect. It is a huge breakthrough in my mind, theoretically, that the self is continuous and lives on these continuous poles, right? Now, what do we do with that? If we see a person is in their disordered side, in their side of despair, of trauma, we then empathize with that side. And we do this in a form that comes from a humanistic psychology. And so that humanistic reaching out is very human to human, very connected. We don't provide, we don't give interpretations. We report on our own feelings about this is how it hurts me, or this is what I feel that you are going through this. And if that patient with disordered side receives that, they will have a moment of authentic experience, just like that. Now, if we turn and go over to the authentic side, this we've integrated from solution-focused therapy. If they present an authentic experience, and usually we're looking for exceptions to personality pathology because solution-focused is an exception-based therapy, then we will esteem that exception. So the borderline patient cuts, but she doesn't cut as deep, she doesn't cut as often, and she tells somebody right away and will say, wow, that makes me happy to know that you did not cut more or deeper. And I'm very impressed that you were able to resist cutting more and deeper. And so we're esteeming their progress, and that's very solution focused. But if you put it into an object relations context, into this, or a self-psychology context, psychoanalytic context, then when that authenticity is expressed from the parents to the patient about the cutting, then immediately that disassembles or drains the libido and identity out of part of the disabled side. So immediately we have less defensiveness. So anytime you touch either pole, you're activating more authenticity and reducing more defensiveness. And that's the Wittenberg principle in combination with what we call the Nysa touchstone, empathy and esteem, depending on which pole the patient is on.
That's very beautiful. And how do you shift, or so it always depends on the patient actually in which phase he is, and depending on the phase he is, you respond accordingly. And it's not something that you actually try to intervene in such a way that he shifts, but actually you're just taking the presentation the person, the patient has in front of you.
Yes, so we also use the idea of locus of control. We've integrated that heavily. So in general, we think that that little baby needs locus of control. She needs to know that when she cries, the primary attachment figure is going to respond and care for her. And that tells her, I'm in control of this situation. I'm in control. That's locus of control. So if we believe that our patients are regressed back to attachment or separation states, trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame and doubt, then we really need to give them locus of control as much as possible. So we're not going to propose ideas of a treatment session or a moment unless they ask us to. And if they ask us to, that's them in locus of control. That's like the toddler saying, hand me my bottle, baba, then mom hands it, then they're in locus of control. So we do want to respond and look to them to have locus of control and to direct us. And this comes from client-directed therapy by Scott Miller. As much as possible, we require the patient to direct us. And so I've given you 5 integrations already, and we have many, many more, many more.
That's really a very integrative way of treating and treatment, and I'm really, happy to have listened and heard this way of the model and the process that you're using in your clinic. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. And again, thank you for what you and SEPI are doing, Markus. You are our oasis, and we appreciate you more than we can say.
Thanks a lot for that very positive feedback, and I'm really happy that I am part of SEPI as well, and I'm very happy to work together with people like you and just come together and bring those ideas together and start finding ways to treat patients in a better way and support them in the ways they need and not we think they need. And that's something I think exactly this relational perspective you're talking about is exactly expressing very, very beautifully. Yeah. And then I would like to ask you the 2 questions also in relation to SEPI. And on the one hand, how has SEPI influenced your career, but also how has SEPI influenced you or the clinics, and what have you gained from it and found and learned? And what is the most meaningful for you about the membership with SEPI?
It's been like crawling through the desert alone for a lot of years, and then finding an oasis, and everyone is hanging around it, having a really good time. That's what it's like. We love SEPI because I've spent so many years, again, I've been doing this for a long time, and the combative stance that people used to take and still take towards other schools of therapy that they don't belong to, even when I was a master's level student back in the 70s, I thought, what's wrong with you people? We're supposed to be the example of mental health, and we're fighting with each other, and patients' lives are going down the tubes because we're fighting with each other. So I've been very frustrated with that for a long time. And plus, I was sitting at a conference years and years ago, the Evolution of Psychotherapy conference, which is a good conference, and people were bashing on each other. And I had this thought, Mark, as it came to me. I said, you know, these are all really smart people. What are the odds that one of them is right and everyone else is wrong? Not very high, is it?
No,
And
no,
so
not at all.
so we have a saying at Nysa, which is everybody's right about something, no one's right about everything. So no one gets to stand up and say, I'm the king boss around here, but also everyone gets a chance to contribute. So we take from the number of schools of therapy we take from, just because I've been exposed to so many through the years, is vast. It's just huge with the schools we draw from. And we take an attitude of where do you belong? Where do you belong? Where do you belong? And as I like to say, being a musician, you know, you don't need 5 bass players in a band. You
No.
need a singer, a drummer, a guitar player, a bass player, a keyboard player. Everyone has their part to make all this music. So integration is it for us. And I've been struggling with that for years, trying to do my own thing, but feeling like I was on that desert because I kept aligning myself with people who were in personality treatment. And then I found SEPI, and it was really like coming home. And the attitude people have, the openness they have, the non-competitive nature that they have, it's thrilling. And so it's like coming home, and we steal, borrow, take from everybody that we read from in SEPI. How can we fit this in? So we really found a home with SEPI.
That's very, very beautiful. And I hope that you're also able to transmit this oasis kind of feeling to your members of the clinic, and that SEPI is something where you really have this distance to the competitive thoughts of psychotherapy schools, but rather seeing that the treatment of the patients is the main thing we're working as psychotherapists. And it's not about our ideas and our knowledge and who is the better or the worse or who has the better knowledge. And I really love the saying that you just said, that everybody knows something, but not everything. And by coming together and saying, I know this little bit and I know this little bit, putting those things together, that is something where I think SEPI has a very, very positive framework to be in.
Yes, and having been around a long time, I do think that there was significant progress made by confining psychotherapy to schools. You know, psychotherapeutic, cognitive behavioral, humanistic, strategic, whatever school you want to say. Progress was made, but around 2000, I think that stopped happening. Progress quit being made. And if you look at the literature after 2000, we're kind of in the desert here, except for people interested in integrative process. And so we were talking about music early on, and in any moment, you know, when Mozart dies and Beethoven starts coming up, in any moment that there's a shift in intellectual perspective, something opens up. Something opens up. Or I like jazz, so you know, when the swing era was ending in the early 40s and the bebop era was starting up, there was this opening that happened in New York City. And so, or in Vienna is where, you know, Mozart gave way to Beethoven, this opening happens. Well, we're at that moment in which the school approach to developing psychotherapeutic ideas is over. And now, where is the creative space opening up? It's in integration. SEPI is it. It's right where it belongs. And to me, leading the way as this space opens up.
Well, that's very, very beautifully said. And that's where I also want to add and ask you, what do you see as the future of psychotherapy integration? If this space is opening up right now, what do you think is the future, and where should SEPI have a specific, or psychotherapists in general should have a very specific perspective and opening up this possibility for creativity?
Well, I mean, I think SEPI does it very well. I'm not sure I have much to say about how SEPI does their job. I think SEPI does their job extremely well. I think embrace. We have to embrace, and for me, radicalize in the sense of go to the root of these things and radicalize what SEPI is encouraging us to do. And that is to really, you know, to take a couple months and study, Zapolsky and the neurology that he's teaching and the comparative primate stuff. Take take a couple months and read that book, even if you were never interested in that book. We've got a therapist right now who's opening up into autism and how you treat autism in what presumes to be a personality disorder presentation, but we're finding is more an autistic presentation. Well, at my late age, I'm an old guy, 66, I'm studying autism and I love it. I'm just opening up another door. So there's kind of a freewheeling feeling to it to follow your instincts, but don't be afraid to study that next thing that's outside of your level of expertise.
Yes, I think that's how we can develop. That's how we can get better therapists, and by interest in just going along the interest and be open to let new things come into your life and in your work as a psychotherapist. Yes. And that's the place where you say creativity can start, because that's space where your interest is as well.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, we feel like we we borrow from everything. So we really borrow from the early psychoanalysts, Freud and Jung in that area, and this idea of instinct. We don't literalize it, but we have instincts that pull us in directions. And when we're treating somebody, we tell our patients, I tell our therapists, follow that voice inside you, that instinct, go with that. Well, those instincts are at play in what you might study next, in what workshop you might take, in a lecture you might go to. If you kind of open up to the world instead of constrict, your instincts and intuition will take you where you need to be. We believe that anyway.
And I think that fits very nicely also a little bit to the deliberate practice perspective, where intuition, I think, is a very, very important thing. And there are a few psychotherapists who have very, very high efficiency and efficacy percentages, and then others have not. But then there's this intuition, but also how can you train people? And that's a little bit coming back to our first discussion point as well. How can you train people to be intuitive and relational?
Well, I think, I've come a long way. I was a head guy, I was a thinker guy. And when I first started working, I did a lot of family systems therapy and strategic therapy, paradoxical interventions, Milton Erickson kind of stuff. And that's very head stuff. Your heart isn't in it. And then when I got committed to treating personality disorder, my borderline patients would yell at me, you know, Diggs, I cannot talk to you today if you're going to be this way. What way? I'm just being a therapist. Oh my God. And so they beat me into being a relational person because they wouldn't tolerate my head stuff. And so I'm as deeply relational as I've ever been in my life, and I'm satisfied with that. But the truth is, there are people who are more talented at relational therapy. And I think we also have to say that that's kind of another little dirty secret we don't like to talk about, is just because you have initials behind your name doesn't mean you're a talented therapist, any more than having a PhD in music means you can play. As one of my old music professors had a PhD, guy couldn't play, sad guy. But so we have to admit that some people are more talented than others. And one of our lead therapists, the kind of the head of our clinic, Tashan, the most talented relational person I've ever met. And I actually refused to teach her very much when I first started training her. I said, I am not going to mess with this talent you have. And so I would just have her go in and I'd give her little tiny bits of guidance. And now, after 4 years, her relational ability is so high and capable, Marcus. I mean, it puts me to absolute shame. And now she's really learning the head stuff at last. And she's been impatient at times, and I was going, no, I know what I'm doing. Just take it easy. So we have to acknowledge that talent exists, as it is in music or math or whatever. Talent exists in this area, and relationality is one of them.
Yeah. How would you say, as a final question to come to end, but I think that's a very beautiful question. How do you say you were able to see this spark, this talent in this person? And how can you find people with a very good talent in psychotherapy?
Well, the story with Tashan and I, it's just such a beautiful story. We did the first interview with her, and I was liking her so much. I just thought, oh, she's really it. She's it. Because I've been training people for a long, long time. So I have an eye, and I know Jung. My PhD is from a Jungian-oriented institute, so I know typology. So I know thinking versus feeling type. I know that stuff really well. Yeah, this is a feeling type. She's answering the questions right. And we stood up to end the interview, and I put my hand out to shake her hands, and she put both her hands up. She was going to hug me, and we've like only known each other for a half hour. Then she put her hands down real quick. I said, she's the one. That's the one. She moves in with relationality, doesn't she?
Oh, that's really great.
Good story. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much about all the information and getting to know your clinics and what you're doing at your clinics. And it sounds like a really, really beautiful place to work as a psychotherapist, but also as a very, very helpful place for people with personality disorders. And I think that's a very, very good thing that we are developing places like you are explaining and that you are head of.
Well, thank you, and thanks, SEPI, so much. We are here to stay. We are not going anyplace. You are our people. You're our oasis. So we're here to stay.
Very great. And now, just as a fun fact at the end, can you tell us some fun fact about you?
Well, I mean, there's the guitar I got, right? I'll show it to you.
Yes, please show it to us.
It is a 1952 Gibson that the old jazz players, Kenny Burrell and Joe Pass, this is the guitar that these guys used to play. And you can get that old sound. I love that old sound, and I can get that old 50s jazz guitar sound out of this thing. So I just got this thing a year ago, and I just love this guitar.
Very beautiful. I would love to ask you to play us a very short if you want, but you don't need to.
Sure. Let's see. You might remember this.
Oh, beautiful. I would love the sound quality to be better on Zoom, but I really enjoyed that. Thanks a lot, Dr. Dix. Steve, thanks a lot for the interview, and hopefully we have the opportunity to see each other at one of SEPI's conferences in the future.
Absolutely. When COVID is over, we will be a mainstay there. We want to show up, and thank you, Marcus, for all you're doing to make something right happen as this moment of creativity opens.
Thanks a lot. See you and have a good day.
See you at a conference. We'll have a
Bye.
conference. Okay, bye-bye.